Hey guys, tonight we're standing on the wind-blasted shores of a Viking coastline. The air stinks of salt and seaweed, and a low mist crawls across the black sand. Suddenly, over the roar of the surf, a shout goes up. A beached whale. Instantly, the entire settlement is in motion. Axes are grabbed, carts are rolled, children are shoved indoors, and dogs are howling like they already smell the feast or the fury. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the rocks, soaked from the knees down, heart racing, not out of excitement, but from the sheer size of it. The creature is monstrous. 40 feet of glistening black hide, slick with seawater and already attracting gulls. The whale's eye is open, glossy and still. It smells wrong, like rotting fish blended with iron and old leather. You don't gag, you're a Viking after all, but your stomach does a nervous flip. This isn't just a moment of luck. A beached whale is a storm-sent gift, divine or cursed depending on your worldview and how fast your neighbors can grab a jawbone. There are no soft moral questions here about marine conservation. No one's calling a biologist. This is meat, oil, bone, and an arm wrestle with the gods all rolled into one glistening heap of blubber. The Jarl arrives, his cloak trailing wet sand. He gives the order without drama. Cut it open, salvage what you can, before the tide changes. You don't ask questions, you run. Axes thunk into rubbery flesh. Long knives slice through layers of fat like butter. Well, butter that fights back. The sound is hideous, wet, stretchy. The belly is opened, steam rising in coils. Inside is a wild collage of organs the size of barrels. A group of older men start removing strips of blubber. Their faces unreadable, movements practiced. Some boys slip and fall in the muck. No one helps. If you're old enough to walk, you're old enough to work. A couple of women join the effort, sleeves rolled, hair tied up with fish bones. They know how to separate intestines without bursting them. You don't. You learn fast. Someone hacks off the lower jaw. You jump back as a tooth the size of your forearm drops into the sand with a soft, disgusting plop. Another man yells for help, rolling the tongue out. It's heavier than a man and feels like boiled leather soaked in vinegar. Honestly, it might be the worst thing you've ever touched. But then someone cheers because the oil sacks are intact. That's money. Trade goods, fuel, light for winter, and even balm for leather or wounds if you're desperate enough. You and another lad help carry chunks of it to a cart. Your arms are slick to the elbows, and your boots make squishing sounds when you walk. Historians still argue whether this process was ritualized or purely practical. Some sagas mention songs sung during the gutting, possibly to honor the gods of the sea or ask forgiveness for stealing one of their children. Others say it was just a race against rot. You pause to breathe. It doesn't help. The smell is everywhere. You wipe your nose with your sleeve, smearing blackish grease across your cheek. A dog tries to get close. Someone throws a chunk of flipper to distract it. In the chaos, a child begins collecting teeth in a basket. She says she's making a necklace for her grandmother. You believe her, and Viking grandmothers are tougher than most warriors. As the tide creeps closer, the pace quickens. Bones are snapped, sawed, pried loose. A crew starts dragging ribs into a pile. They're long enough to form the frame of a small hut, or maybe a shrine. Already the older folks are arguing about who gets which part. The Jarl claims the skull. Of course, no one dares dispute it. Nearby, a man with missing fingers uses a curved blade to slice off a chunk of tongue and bite into it raw. You stare. He winks. Good for the blood, he mutters through chewing. You politely decline. There's a moment, a strange quiet one, when the work stops. The fog thickens and curls around the whale like mourning cloth. The Jarl places a carved bone token on the creature's head, just above the eye socket. No one explains. You just stand in silence. You feel watched. Then a raven caws, someone sneezes, work resumes. You help carry vertebrae to the shore. Each one is the size of a helmet, You trip once, land in slime, and get up laughing. Sort of. The bones are laid in a neat line, half buried in pebbles. Some say it marks territory. Others think it's to guide future whales to beach themselves in the same spot. You're not sure which is weirder. By nightfall, the beach is slick with trails, as if giants had danced barefoot through oil. The carcass is mostly gone. What's left will be revisited in the morning, or left to the gulls, or forgotten. Already you hear whispers. Who gets the teeth? Who saw the god sign in the guts? Who gets to carve their name into a rib? One man claims the whale was sent by Ran, goddess of the drowned, as a message. Another swears it's bad luck and refuses to touch the bones. That doesn't stop him from taking a few and sneaking them into his cart when no one's looking. That night, the settlement smells like whale. Fires flicker under hanging strips of meat. Children poke at bits of cartilage with sticks. You collapse on a bed of straw, arms aching, ears still ringing from the constant shouts and crack of splitting bone. In the distance, the ocean sighs. The gods, if they're watching, say nothing. And you? You sleep like someone who spent the day dismembering a sea monster. By the time the second morning light cracks over the mountains, the whale's once massive form has already shrunk. Not in size, but in majesty. What had loomed like a point fallen from the waves now lies ragged, picked over, a hollowed carcass barely holding itself together. You, rubbing blisters on your palms, return to the beach already dreading the day's chore list. This isn't the kind of Viking glory they write songs about. No longships, no gold, just the joy of scooping guts from bone before it festers. Your first task? The cauldron, or rather the infernal pit of bubbles the elders lovingly call the kettle from hell. It's a monstrous iron cauldron dragged out from the smoothie just for occasions like this, boiling down strips of whale blubber into oil. You add another armload of fuel to the fire beneath it. Driftwood, broken oars, even some old shield fragments. Wood's scarce out here. Everything burns eventually. The heat is immediate, a humid wall that sticks your tunic to your back. The blubber sizzles as it goes in, hissing and curling like angry sea serpents. The smell? Imagine rancid butter cooked in an unwashed sock, then multiplied by 10. You wipe your nose again. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. An elder beside you stirs the brew with a pole longer than you are tall. His beard is tied in knots to keep it from falling in. His face is streaked with soot and pride. He tells you that good whale oil is more valuable than silver when the days get short and the nights bite. Lamps, leather, even medicinal salves, if you trust the remedies of a man who smells like stew, gone evil. You carry buckets of the rendered oil to clay jars lined up in the shade. One slips, your boots slide. You catch it just in time, but not before splashing your leg. It burns. Not fire burn, but a slow, penetrating warmth that seeps through the skin. Later, you'll rub snow on it and hope for the best. For now, you limp back for another round. Others aren't boiling, they're burning. Along the ridge, a group tends to a towering bonfire. Ribs, skull fragments, tail spurs, anything that couldn't be carted home or sold, goes into the pyre. Sparks fly like drunken fireflies. The smell shifts from meat to something more final, smoky, almost ceremonial. A few mutter prayers to Odin, or maybe Njord, the sea god. Others just mutter curses. The fire pops and groans like the whale is still alive, protesting. Then there's the burying. Not all parts are usable. The innards, the parts nobody can identify, those go into pits dug above the tide line. You help dig one with a spade carved from a broken oar. The soil here is half sand, half ancient fish. Each shovelful is wet and heavy. You find yourself competing against another team who can dig faster, deeper. You both pretend it's fun. It's not. Once the pit is ready, you and two others drag over a sagging bundle of intestine. You tip it in. The splash is soft and sickening. A cloud of flies instantly claims it. One lands on your lip. You don't even flinch anymore. The grave is covered, marked with a simple stone. Not for memory, just to warn kids not to step there unless they want to sink into something that smells like nightmares. Meanwhile, a different group is chipping away at the vertebrae, trying to hollow some out for storage containers. You pass one older woman using a flint knife to delicately carve a spiral design into a piece of shoulder blade. She says it's for her daughter's wedding, going to be a bowl for serving dried fish and honey. Romantic. You ask why whale bones? Why not wood? She laughs, a wet hacking sound. Whale lasts longer, doesn't burn, doesn't rot, and if you eat from something that's been to the bottom of the sea, maybe your marriage won't sink either. Historians still argue whether these whalebone carvings were mostly functional or symbolic. Some believe the images etched into them were talismans. Others think Vikings just got bored in winter and turned leftovers into dinnerware. Either way, the result is the same. Bone becomes legacy. Later that afternoon, you're sent to help with the leg bone. It's massive, thick enough for a child to crawl through. Two men are already chipping at it, trying to extract the marrow. It's considered a delicacy. The problem? The bone is slippery. Every swing of the axe sends vibrations up your spine. Finally, someone wedges a wedge, literally, and cracks it open with a loud snap. The marrow inside is pale, veiny, and somehow both solid and gooey. You dip a piece of bread in it. Chewy, salty, fatty. You're not sure if you like it or just need the calories. Either way, it's gone in 2 bites. Suddenly, a commotion. Down by the shore, 2 boys have been caught wrestling over a chunk of jaw. Apparently, they both want it to make a new sled. An older man steps in and grabs the jawbone, snapping it in half with a well-placed stomp. Problem solved. Now neither gets the whole thing. Viking justice, baby. As dusk approaches, you're sent to help smoke some of the remaining meat. Thin strips of it hang from racks near the longhouse, exposed to smoldering peat fires. The smoke smells better than anything else today. Earthy, warm, less offensive. You stand near the racks, eyes half closed, pretending it's just a normal day. Not one involving whales or blood or backaches. Just as you start to relax, a raven lands nearby. It tilts its head, eyes you, then hops closer to a discarded vertebra. With surprising force, it pecks into the center and pulls out a stringy bit of tissue. It's been watching all day, taking notes, waiting. You whisper, "You're welcome." That night, the elders hold a small gathering around the bonefire's fading embers. Someone brings out an old pipe. Someone else starts a story about a whale that swallowed a boat whole. You lay back in the grass, sore but oddly proud. The stars blink into existence one by one. The air still smells faintly of oil, smoke, and sea. But now you hardly notice. A few kids sit nearby, carving small runes into bits of bone they've collected. One claims hers will help her find lost sheep. Another swears his is a love charm. You chuckle. No one tells them otherwise. Why ruin the magic? Just before sleep, you hear someone say, "You can always tell how rich a village is by how much of the whale they keep and how much they burn." You think about that, and as your eyes slip closed, you imagine a distant future where someone finds these bones puzzled by the carvings, the marks, the scraps of lore. Maybe they'll think the whale was a god, or a curse, or both. You smile. The whale's long gone, but it'll feed stories for years. The third day dawns gray, the sky hanging low like a wet wool blanket. The whale's form is now fully unrecognizable. Just dark mounds on the beach, streaked with seagull droppings and trampled sand. But the work? Oh, the work isn't over. Not even close. You drag yourself out of the longhouse before your breath even fogs. Someone's banging on a pot outside like it's a war drum. The call is clear. Back to the blubber, back to the smoke, back to the ever-growing piles of, well, everything. The entire settlement smells like low-tide stew. Today's job is simple in concept, hideous in practice. Manage the overflow. Boil, burn, or bury. Those are your options. You head first toward the boiling site, where the oil vats from yesterday still bubble like volcanic pits. They haven't stopped. A new crew works the flames, but it's your turn to rotate in. The cauldron is crusted with hardened grease at the rim, and the earth beneath it has turned to a black slop that tries to steal your boots every other step. You're given a shovel, not for digging, but for scooping. Chunks of unprocessed blubber, some the size of your chest, need to be sliced thinner before they go in. Your hands grow numb from the cold, even as the fire lashes your face with heat. Welcome to Viking skincare. Freeze your back, roast your front, and smear yourself with whale goo. Some of the oil has already been transferred into thick-skinned sheepskin bladders and sealed with wax. These are destined for trade down the coast, across to Ireland, maybe even to the Roos markets if the weather behaves. One old trader says that in the East, nobles rub it on their chests to soothe the lungs. You're not sure if that's medicine or madness, but he swears by it and coughs like a man auditioning for death. Others say oil can keep away spirits. One woman dabs some on the doorway of her house, muttering in Old Norse. You don't ask which spirit she's talking about. Around here, anything could be listening. Next comes burning. The fire's moved inland a bit, now fed not just by bones, but by failed projects. Someone had tried to carve a ladle from a shoulder blade. It snapped. Into the fire. Another kid tried to use a tooth as a hammer. Tooth broke. Fire. There's a kind of Viking recycling program at work here. Use it, reuse it, or reduce it to ash and let the smoke tell the gods your story. The fire crackles as ribs are leaned into it like spokes in a wagon wheel. They hiss and pop with trapped fat. Smoke rises in thick curls, smelling of grief and grease and faint sweetness. One man claims the smoke attracts fish if blown toward the sea. Another says it attracts ghosts. Either way, no one stands downwind for long. As you tend the fire, a woman approaches with a bone too large for the fire to handle. It's a pelvis, curved like a crescent moon, with notches where muscle used to cling. She sets it down and squints at you. Bury it, she says, then walks away. Which brings you to the third task of the day, burial. The burial pits have multiplied. What started as a single solemn trench has become a checkerboard of refuse tombs. Every unusable chunk must be interred, because if left above ground, the smell will haunt the village until the snow returns. You grab a sled and heave the pelvis onto it. The bone groans as it settles, like it remembers better days when it helped guide a giant through the deep. You grunt, dragging it through sludge and sand. A boy follows with a spade. Together, you reach a pit just beyond the rise, already half full of discarded fins and stomach lining. You tip the pelvis in, it lands with a thud. The boy crosses himself in a quiet, superstitious motion that has nothing to do with Christianity and everything to do with not wanting to wake whatever lives in the dirt now. You begin to cover it with loose earth. The mound takes shape slowly like a misshapen grave. You place a stone on top, not to mark it, but to weigh it down. Nearby, an older man is doing something odd. He's not burying bones, he's stacking them. Vertebrae lined carefully in a spiral. You wander closer. Art, you ask. He laughs. No, a snare for spirits. You stare. They like circles, he mutters, laying another vertebra down. Traps them, keeps them from crawling into our homes. Historians still argue whether such bone arrangements were religious, artistic, or simply eccentric. No records explain them clearly, just hints in sagas and the occasional burial mound littered with precisely placed bones. From the hill, you can now see the whole beach, the whale's bones strewn like shipwreck debris. Some are already drying, bleached by sun and wind. Others are wrapped in cloth, labeled for projects. Handles, hooks, tent pegs, beads. The dead whale will live again, piece by piece. But not all bones are destined for practical use. You help one elder lug a rib, longer than you are tall, to the edge of the fjord. There he drives it upright into the sand with a heavy mallet. The rib becomes a standing stone, pointing seaward. He places a small fish at its base. Marker, he explains. For what? For this moment. You nod. You don't entirely understand, but you respect it. In a world where time is told by storms and scars, sometimes a rib in the sand is the only way to remember a week like this. As the sun lowers, painting the sky in ash and ochre, you sit by the last fire. Around you, the settlement glows orange with lamplight, oil from the very beast you helped dismantle. Children run between houses holding fishbone toys. A woman ladles stew from a pot made from jawbone. A man sits outside, carving runes into a polished scapula, whispering charms. And above it all, the smoke rises, long ribbons curling into the wind, carrying with them the memory of blubber, bone, and burden. You close your eyes and wonder if the whale had never beached, would the village be poorer or just quieter? It's hard to say. You've boiled, burned, and buried its parts, but somehow the whale still feels here. Maybe in the oil on your skin, maybe in the bones in the ground, or maybe just in the way everyone pauses now and then, to glance at the sea as if expecting another god beast to rise from the depths. And if it does, you'll be ready with a blade, a sled, and a nose that no longer cares. The fourth morning arrives not with sunlight, but with the relentless creak of a cartwheel and the squawk of gulls. You blink into the pale light as mist rolls in again, always the mist, and realize the air smells less like decay today and more like wahi, bone. Dry, clean, but still pungent in that peculiar way only the aftermath of rot can be. The whale's flesh is mostly gone now. What remains are the bones, hundreds, perhaps thousands of pounds of them, stacked in uneven heaps across the shore and dragged inland in makeshift sleds. You and a dozen others are now part of what the village Riley calls the second harvest. The meat-fed bellies, the oil-lit fires. But the bones are where stories begin. You're assigned to the bone sorting crew. It sounds dignified until you realize it mostly involves picking through ribs longer than your arm and vertebrae slick with marrow residue. You and a tall girl with one missing eyebrow from an unfortunate seal oil incident, she says, are tasked with hauling the jawbones into a central pile. They are enormous, curved like ancient sled runners, some cracked, some jagged. One of them weirdly has teeth worn smooth on one side. You wonder what it had been chewing or who. The villagers are now assessing what to do with it all. Whale bones, after all, don't decompose quickly. You can't just leave them to fade. They linger. They announce themselves. And in the Viking world, where material goods double as symbols, tools, weapons, and warnings, leftover bones are a creative goldmine. Your first stop is with two older men arranging ribs in the shape of an archway. They say they're building a spirit gate, an entrance to a sacred grove inland, where bones of important animals and ancestors are placed in small rock circles. They hammer the ribs into the ground with carved stones, each one muttering to himself as he works. They disagree on the shape. One wants a circle, the other a crescent. You suspect they've argued about this before. They invite you to help, handing you a rib almost as tall as you. You jam it into the earth, lean your weight on it, and with a satisfying crunch, it sinks in and stands. You step back and realize it really does look like some ancient doorway to another world. Historians still argue whether Viking bone structures like these were ceremonial, practical, or simply creative madness born of boredom and excess material. Some sagas hint that bones were used to mark sacred spaces. Others suggest they were left as warnings to enemies or even tributes to sea gods. What is certain is that no one left these bones untouched. Your next task takes you to a small hill where boundary markers are being erected. Apparently, two families have been disputing land for years, arguing about where one farm ends and the other begins. Now they've decided to settle it with bones. You help carry several whale vertebrae, each about the size of a round stool, up the hill and place them at equal intervals along a line scratched into the soil. A local skald announces the new border with a rhyme involving whales, war, and one particularly unflattering joke about someone's grandmother. Everyone laughs except the grandmother. Later that day, you are pulled away by a group of boys working near the water's edge. They found a half-jaw and are trying to stand it upright like a shrine. You offer a better idea, lay it flat, and use it as a bench. They're skeptical until one of them sits and declares it the most powerful seat on the coast. Word spreads quickly. By evening, half the village wants a whalebone seat. Some even suggest turning the largest skull fragments into thrones for the Jarl and his council. One woman jokes that if the Jarl sits in a whale's head, maybe he'll start thinking like one. Another jokes he already smells like one. The Jarl, hearing both, chuckles and says he's fine with smelling like power. But the bones aren't just for decoration. You're invited to a small meeting where disputes are settled, the local thing or council. Instead of holding it in the longhouse as usual, the Jarl decides to host it in the clearing among the bones. You help arrange the larger pieces into a circle, using the biggest jawbones as the Jarl's chair. The atmosphere changes instantly. It feels older, heavier. As the council begins, people sit on vertebrae stools, ribs, and chunks of whale spine. The effect is surreal, like holding court in the skeleton of a fallen god. The first issue discussed is fishing rights. The second, who gets to keep a particular shoulder blade that someone swears was promised to my cousin's brother's wife before she died. The Jarl rules in favor of the cousin. The wife's ghost is reportedly pleased. Outside the bone circle, kids are playing with smaller fragments. They chase each other with ribs like swords, pretending to be sea monsters. One girl ties 3 vertebrae together and drags them like a cart for her doll. Another uses a thin sliver of bone to draw in the sand, runic shapes that vaguely resemble a boat or maybe a bird. You can't tell, but she looks proud. Later, you find yourself walking the beach alone, past the piles, arches, and seated jawbones. You pass a man quietly carving a knot pattern into a femur. He doesn't look up, but says, "This one's for my son's house, door lintel. Brings luck if it comes from the sea." You ask how he knows. He shrugs. "Worked for me." In the low tide line, someone has begun to embed teeth into the wet sand, arranging them in a ring. You ask why. "To mark a moon wish," they say cryptically. You don't press further. Some traditions, you sense, aren't for outsiders, or even insiders who ask too many questions. As night descends, the bones seem to glow faintly under the stars, pale and ghostly. You sit beneath the archway of ribs, back against a vertebra, watching firelight flicker across a skull someone placed near the water. You feel watched, but not in a threatening way. More like the bones themselves remember being alive and are quietly amused by how earnestly humans try to repurpose them. You wonder how many years these bones will last, how many storms they'll outlive, how many children will grow up thinking it's normal to sit on a jawbone or build a fence out of ribs. And then you realize, to them, it will be normal. The whale is no longer just a creature, it's a landmark, a monument, a tool, a boundary, a seat, a story. And you were there to see it all begin. The 5th day after the whale's arrival begins with an unusual sound, the clink of a hammer on bone. You follow the noise through the morning fog to find a crowd gathered at the edge of the village. In the center of a trampled patch of dirt, the Jarl stands beside the enormous whale skull, what's left of it at least. You've seen the thing before, when it still had eyes and teeth and the smell of fresh death. Now cleaned and dried in the weak sun, it's ghost pale, mottled with ash stains and small carved notches that weren't there before. The Jarl isn't smiling. He raises a hand. Silence falls. You watch as 2 young men drive a thick wooden pole into the earth. It's not some delicate ceremonial stick. It's the trunk of a small tree, bark half stripped, the top sharpened to a point. With great effort, they slide the skull down the pole, the massive cranium tipping slightly to one side like it's still trying to peer toward the sea. And just like that, the whale has returned, no longer beast, but banner. The Jarl steps back. The villagers murmur. A few cross themselves, others nod solemnly. One man lets out a low whistle. It's not just about intimidation, though that's certainly part of it. This is a marker, a declaration, a warning, a memory. In Viking culture, placing bones, especially massive, unmistakable ones, on poles was sometimes done to honor gods, assert dominance, or even claim spiritual favor. No written law says a Jarl must mount a skull at the edge of his territory, but there it is anyway. And now no one will forget who owns this stretch of coast. You help stack smaller bones around the base, creating a kind of cairn. Femurs, ribs, even a few teeth. It looks like a miniature fortress made from the body of a leviathan. The Jarl steps forward again and drops a carved token into the whale's open mouth. A little wooden disc etched with a spiral, soaked in oil. "What is it?" you ask. He looks at you, eyes serious. A whisper. Later you learn it's meant to invite the gods, particularly Njord and Ran, the spirits of the sea, to acknowledge the Jarl's strength and the village's triumph. The whale's death becomes not a tragedy, not just a meal, but a victory. And the skull is now a kind of shrine, a very intimidating, slightly crooked shrine. Some of the older villagers say this isn't the first time. Generations back, another whale washed ashore during a storm that wrecked half the coast. After the village salvaged what they could, the skull was placed atop a tall boulder and used as a meeting point for trade deals. It stayed there for 30 years until a raiding party from the north smashed it to pieces. That skull's fragments were buried in the longhouse walls for luck, or revenge, or both. You walk the perimeter of the skull pole, noticing other additions. Someone's tied bits of red cloth to the sharpened ends of ribs laid like spears around the base. Another has placed a carved piece of amber in one of the empty eye sockets. It catches the morning light and glows like a single haunted eye. The children dare each other to run up and touch it. One does. He falls down a minute later, not from a curse, just from tripping in the mud. Still someone yells, "The whale's angry!" and the crowd gasps. You can't help but smile. In the following hours, others bring offerings to the skull: a strip of dried fish, a feather, a small pouch of herbs. One woman brings a single goose egg and sets it carefully near the jaw. She says it's for fertility, not hers but the earth's. A good season for planting, she hopes. You're not sure how many gods handle both sea monsters and barley, but you admire her optimism. By midday, the skull pole has become a fixture. No one tells you to stop working, but everything slows. People begin gathering around it in quiet moments, like they would a fire. It's become part of the village's rhythm, a symbol. You get sent to the edge of the settlement to fetch driftwood for fence repair. Along the way, you find a small clearing where someone has started carving teeth. Whale teeth, when polished, are creamy white and smooth. They make for excellent beads or pendants. One man is turning them into small figurines, tiny guns, warriors, animals. You pick one up, a bear with a spiral on its back. He tells you it's for protection. Against what? Against forgetting, he says. You carry the driftwood back and past the skull again. Now it's surrounded by a kind of hush, not fear exactly. Respect. It's not just a dead animal anymore. It's become part of the village mythology, a totem, a story anchor. Historians still debate how common these skull poles were. Some claim they were rare, used only in special ceremonies or times of crisis. Others believe they were more widespread, often mistaken by modern archaeologists as remnants of altars or border posts. What's clear is that to the Vikings, bones weren't waste. They were legacy. As night falls, the sky burns gold and red. You sit with the others, backs to the longhouse wall, watching the skull's silhouette cut the sky like a ship's prow. Someone starts singing a low, slow chant in a tongue you half recognize. Old Norse mixed with something older still. The flames from the cooking fire flicker in the hollow eye sockets. The Jarl joins you quiet for a long time. Finally, he says, "You think the sea will send another?" You don't answer, but deep inside, a part of you hopes not. Once is enough. Still, you look to the horizon, where the mist swallows everything and the wind carries the smell of salt and memory. The whale is gone, but its bones are here. Its mouth, now open forever, faces the sea, waiting to speak again. And maybe it will. You wake late on the sixth morning, shoulders stiff, hands chapped, and your entire tunic reeking faintly of scorched blubber and smoke. But today's different. There's no call to the beach, no fire already blazing, no shouted orders from the Jarl. Instead, you're told to report to the longhouse. And you're not alone. Others your age are summoned too. Inside, the air is thick with steam from a boiling pot, a sharp contrast to the cold wind outside. You see rows of whale bones lined along the walls, some clean to ivory shine, others still tinged with the tan of old blood. In the corner, an old woman sits with a pile of jaw fragments and something that looks suspiciously like furniture. She grunts as you enter. "Sit," she says, pointing to a stool carved from vertebrae. It creaks, but holds. It's not exactly comfortable, but it's strangely solid, curved in a way that fits your spine almost perfectly. She taps the bone with a long stick. "You're sitting on a lumbar vertebra. Took 2 days to clean it. Now you'll help make 3 more. Welcome to the whalebone carpenter's den. Your task today isn't to cut or burn, it's to build." You're handed a slab of flattened jawbone and a flint blade to smooth its edges. Nearby, another youth sands a rib into a bench leg. Someone else is assembling a ladder. Yes, a ladder, using fibulas and crossbars made of whale scapula. You marvel at how right it looks. Not primitive, not crude, just different, clever, pale and smooth like driftwood from another world. The old woman nods. Whalebone doesn't rot, doesn't warp, lasts through storms. Longer than oak, longer than men. You begin carving your own piece, a wide plank meant for a stool. You scrape and file, the scent of bone dust dry in your nose. With each stroke, you begin to understand the appeal. There's a tactile rhythm here, a history etched into the very material. This bone held up a leviathan. Now it will hold up your uncle when he sits to drink. You glance over. Someone is fashioning a door lintel. Another, a table leg. A third, more ambitious still, is working on what looks like a bed frame. For my wedding, he mutters. Romantic, you say. Sturdy, he corrects. As the hours stretch, you help assemble a low bench from rib slats and vertebrae ends. You test it with your full weight. It doesn't creak, doesn't wobble, it just exists, like it's always been part of the room. The longhouse itself begins to transform. Chairs multiply, tables stretch out, racks and hooks are added, made from jawbone and tusk. One man sets a fire screen made from overlapping thin bone plates. It reflects light with a faint shimmer, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. The Jarl visits near sundown. He walks through the space slowly, running his fingers along a polished beam made of spine. He sits on a newly carved bench and says nothing for a full minute. Then quietly, keep going. That night, you eat sitting on your own creation, a flat piece of scapula lashed to a rib base. It doesn't rock. You feel oddly proud. Later, while cleaning up, you discover a quiet project tucked in a corner. A small box made from smooth vertebrae pieces, inlaid with amber and sealed with leather hinges. Inside are bits of thread, a bone needle, and several buttons made from polished tooth. A sewing kit, delicate, thoughtful. You ask who made it. No one answers, but someone has. Viking furniture wasn't just for sitting or sleeping, it held meaning. Some of it bore carved prayers. Others contained family symbols, knotwork designs passed from generation to generation. Historians know that certain burial sites include whole rooms furnished with whalebone pieces meant to follow the dead into the afterlife. As the fire dies low, you're handed a small jaw fragment and told to carve whatever you want into it. A name, a mark, a dream. You don't know what to choose, so you start with a spiral, always a good place to begin. By now, your fingers have memorized the curve of whalebone. They know where it gives and where it resists, where it splinters if struck wrong, and where it hums under pressure like something alive. You've spent days surrounded by ribs and skulls, benches and arches, each whispering its own afterlife into the village's design. But today, it gets personal. You're handed a comb. Not just any comb, a delicate thing carved from a thin sliver of polished jawbone, its teeth so narrow they could thread silk. It's smooth to the touch, so finely crafted it could almost pass for ivory. The woman who gives it to you doesn't speak much. She simply nods and hands it over like she's passing down a secret. Your job isn't to make combs today, it's to use one on yourself and others. Personal grooming in the Viking Age is a bigger deal than you'd guess. Despite their reputation for blood and boats, these people care deeply about appearances. They bathe more often than many of their European neighbors. They oil their hair, they braid their beards, and importantly, they comb. Bone combs were a Viking essential, tucked into belts, carried on journeys, even buried with the dead. And not just for vanity, but for practicality. Lice, after all, don't respect honor or axes. You begin with your own hair. It's knotted, tangled from wind and sleep and 3 days of smoke. The comb catches, you wince. A few hairs snap. You pull gently, slower. The sensation is strange, half pain, half pleasure. A slow reclaiming of order after so much chaos. The bone warms in your hand as you work. Nearby, an old man sits beside you and motions for help. You blink. He's got a beard like a frost-twisted pine tree. You raise the comb. He nods once. You begin carefully. The comb drags through his beard like a boat through ice. He grunts with each tug, but doesn't flinch. When you're done, he pats your shoulder and mutters something that might be a thank you or a curse. Hard to tell with his accent. Others come. A child with twigs in her braid. A woman with curls knotted from salt wind. A young warrior whose head is shaved but sports a single long lock trailing from his crown, already decorated with beads made from polished vertebrae. You help him thread a new one on, carved with a spiral, of course. The comb becomes a quiet ceremony, passed from hand to hand. With it, gossip travels. Plans form. Someone mentions that a trader from the west saw a longship carrying whalebone weapons, daggers, clubs, spearheads. Someone else scoffs. Bone breaks too easy. But you wonder. Later, you're brought to the boneworker's tent. It smells like smoke, salt, and oil. Tools hang from ropes, flint chisels, bone drills, files of stone and sand. The master carver waves you over and drops a basket of fragments in your lap. Teeth, he says, combs, hooks, whatever fits. You sort through the pieces, noticing how whalebone varies. Some pieces are almost soft, porous, perfect for soaking up dye. Others are dense and sharp-edged. One jagged splinter still bears a bit of scorched flesh. You carve carefully, shaping a comb tooth by tooth. You press too hard on the first try and snap one. The second holds. The third sings. Over the hours, your pile grows. 3 combs, a button, and 1 hairpin shaped like a tiny fish. The master carver inspects each, grunts at 2, nods at the others, keeps the fish. But combs are not just tools. They're symbols. In many burial sites, combs are placed beside the dead, sometimes wrapped in cloth, sometimes worn like charms. Scholars debate whether they were status markers, practical necessities, or even magical objects tied to personal luck or protection. A well-made comb might mean you were well-respected or simply well-groomed. One story you hear that night, shared over a fire in some very chewy stew, tells of a seeress who combed the hair of dying warriors to prepare their spirits for Valhalla. She used a bone comb soaked in herbs and fish oil, muttering blessings with every stroke. It's said her comb still lies buried with her, humming softly in the ground. You sleep with your first handmade comb tucked into your belt. The next morning, you're woken not by gulls or fire, but laughter. Children have discovered the bone workshop and are using the combs for everything except hair. One is pretending to fish with hers. Another insists his grants wishes. A third is wearing his in his beard and demanding to be addressed as Lord of the Lice. You can't argue with the creativity. You start helping them make new ones, smaller, simpler, lopsided. One child draws a spiral on hers with charcoal and calls it a ghost trap. Another asks if her comb can make her hair grow longer. You pause. Only if you sing to it, you say. She does, loudly, in the wrong key. It's perfect. Later that day, you're sent to deliver combs to the northern edge of the village. There, you meet a woman who's weaving cloth using whalebone needles and a loom reinforced with jawbone struts. She examines the combs, nods in approval, and hands you a length of thread dyed with seaweed and iron dust. A trade. You're first. You return to the village just as a storm rolls in from the sea. Rain lashes the roofs. Wind howls through the arches of bone. People retreat indoors, huddled around fires, brushing hair, weaving cord, sharpening tools. In the flickering light, you watch as the Jarl calmly combs his beard with a bone comb etched with runes. He doesn't speak, just combs, each stroke slow and deliberate. As the storm rages outside, the bone combs click softly one after another, like the ticking of an ancient secret clock. And you realize, in a world of iron and storm, sometimes the most enduring power is the quiet one that smooths, steadies, and holds. The rain from the previous night hasn't stopped. It's just shifted, softer now, like whispers tapping on rooftops. A persistent, wet hush that soaks cloaks, shoes, and nerves. You squelch through the muddy village path toward the edge of the settlement, where the land rises slightly and the houses lean like old secrets. This isn't where the fishermen live, or the bone carvers, or the warriors. This is where the vulva lives, the seeress. You've seen her before, usually at a distance. Thin, tall, older than old, draped in layers of wool and beads and animal skins. Her hair's silver and bound in coils, often streaked with ash or something green. Her hut smells like sage, salt, and something unplaceable. And around it? Bones. So many bones. They jut from the ground like strange teeth, circle her house in half-buried spirals, hang from rafters, and dangle from trees like wind chimes. Most are animal, goat, deer, raven. But some are unmistakably whale. You see jaw fragments, vertebrae polished smooth, a massive rib serving as an arched lintel above her door. It's been carved with runes that look like they weren't written so much as bled into place. You're not entirely sure why you're here. The Jarl sent you with a bundle of offerings, a fresh comb, a carved tooth, and a small pouch of dried herbs. She asked, he said, and she doesn't ask often. So here you are, standing in the rain with a bundle wrapped in linen, debating whether to knock. You don't have to. The door creaks open on its own. You step inside. The hut is dark, smoky, warm. The air tastes of burned herbs and damp wool. Runes carved into bone glint from every surface. Strings of teeth sway gently. A pot simmers in the corner, bubbling something gray-green. And there, on a mat made of stitched whale hide, sits the vulva. She doesn't look up. You brought them? You nod, unsure whether to speak. You hold out the bundle. She takes it, unwraps it slowly, inspects each item with long fingers covered in soot and silver rings. Good, she murmurs. They'll listen. You realize she's not talking to you. In the center of the room, there's a circular arrangement of vertebrae, whale bones, bleached white and etched with delicate spirals, and symbols. You count 12. They form a ring around a shallow bowl filled with dark water. At the bottom of the bowl lies a single amber bead, a sliver of jaw, and a fishbone twisted like a question mark. She gestures for you to sit across from her. You do. Then she begins to hum. It's not music exactly. More like sound given shape, a rhythm older than words. Her fingers tap against the vertebrae, each producing a different tone. The bones hum back, resonating softly like bells under a lake. You're not sure if it's real, but the room gets colder. She stops, opens her eyes, looks directly at you. The whale had a message, she says, but it came in pieces. You swallow. A message for who? For the one who lifted its heart from the fire, she replies. It takes you a moment to realize she means you. On the second day, you helped remove the largest chunk of blubber and deliver it to the cauldron. The center, the heart. She leans forward. Do you remember its eye? You do. That first morning, you looked into the whale's eye as it lay beached, still wet, still round, unblinking, like it saw something. Dreams don't always die when bodies do, she whispers. Then she places a bone in your hands, a small vertebra carved with 3 intersecting spirals. Keep this. Sleep with it beneath your head. You hesitate. Not for luck, she adds, for remembering. Historians still debate the role of bones in Norse magic. Some say they were merely tools, inkwells, charms, trinkets. Others believe whale bones, in particular, held deeper meaning, tied to the sea, to death, to rebirth. Their size, their endurance, their music when struck, these were not lost on people who saw the world as alive with spirits. You leave the hut in silence, the bone wrapped in wool and tucked into your belt. Outside, the rain has stopped, but the world still feels wet, slippery, like something just beneath the surface is moving. Over the next days, you notice odd things. The comb you gave the vulva ends up back in your satchel without explanation. Children claim to hear humming near the bones at night. One of the carved teeth you delivered is found buried near the Jarl's Hall, surrounded by a ring of pebbles. You start dreaming of whales, not dead ones, living, swimming beneath black water, eyes glowing like amber, mouths open in silence. In the dreams, you're always watching from above, but sometimes you're not. Sometimes you are the whale. You ask the vulva what it means. She smiles with half her mouth. It means your story isn't done being told. You begin carrying the carved vertebra with you everywhere. Not for luck, not for fear, but because every time you leave it behind, you feel like something's missing, like a map without a compass. One evening, while walking the edge of the fjord, you find a child drawing runes in the sand with a rib bone. She tells you she dreamed the symbols. You recognize them. They match the ones on your vertebra. You ask her what they mean. She shrugs. A big fish said them. The sea glows faintly in the fading light. And as the tide rolls in, you sit beside the bone arch at the edge of the village, vertebra in your hand, watching the waves. Somewhere out there, another whale is swimming, breathing, listening, and maybe, just maybe, dreaming of you. You wake to laughter, not the loud, boisterous kind from the longhouse when someone tells a fish story too large to be true, but high, chaotic, delighted laughter. The kind that only comes from children in the kind of trouble they don't yet recognize as such. You throw on your cloak and step outside into the chill. Dew beads along the bones scattered across the village, glinting like tiny stars in the grass. Your boots squelch through the damp earth toward the source of the commotion. A group of kids sprinting wildly, shrieking and ducking behind piles of driftwood and old barrels. In their hands, ribs, whale ribs. Not weapons exactly, Brain, and not tools either. Playthings. One boy brandishes a rib like a staff, charging at another who holds a larger one like a curved shield. Nearby, a little girl wears a full vertebra around her waist like a hoop skirt, dragging it clumsily through the mud, giggling with every slippery step. She nearly topples into a puddle. Someone has created a game. You're not sure of the rules, and they probably aren't either. There's a large circle etched into the mud. Maybe it's a battlefield, maybe a kitchen, maybe a ritual site for imaginary sea spirits. In one corner, two boys are building a fortress from tiny bones and skull fragments, guarded by a line of whale teeth jammed into the ground like crude sentinels. A doll made of kelp and twine sits atop the tallest vertebra like a queen. Her crown, a carved spiral. You approach cautiously. You're tall, you're old, you're a bone burner, a blubber hauler, a comb maker. You're serious, you're not exactly cool. But then a little boy hands you a rib and says solemnly, "You're the sea dragon. Oh, you're in the game now." You square your shoulders, hunch forward, and let out a growl so guttural it startles a nearby goose. The children scream and scatter in every direction, squealing. One yells, "The Whale King is angry." Another replies, "But I fed him a fish rock. He should be happy." You're not entirely sure what a fish rock is, but you pretend to consider it seriously before bellowing again and swinging your rib scepter through the air. The laughter returns, louder this time, and then comes the inevitable. Someone gets poked in the eye. It's not serious, just enough to stop the game, start the tears, and summon an elder with a scowl. The children scatter again, but the energy remains. By midday, things calm. The ribs are left in the mud, now just tools again, bones for tomorrow's fire or carving or fence post. But for a moment, they were ships and swords and dragons and geese. Later, as you clean up the play area with another villager, you realize something. The children weren't just playing, they were remembering. Not literally. Most of them are too young to understand the whale's full story. But through games, they're absorbing it, retelling it in their own language, making it live again. Historians often overlook play in their reconstructions of Viking life. There's no written rule book, no saga about a rib being used as a magic baton in a game of who can shriek the loudest. But archaeologists do find miniature tools, carved animal figurines, tiny boats, some even made from whalebone. It's not hard to imagine that children, surrounded by these materials, turn leftovers into legends. After cleaning, you pocket a tiny shard shaped like a tooth. Maybe you'll carve a game piece from it, or maybe it's already perfect, just as it is. As evening descends, you join a group gathered by the central fire. One of the elder women begins telling a story, an old one, full of gods and sea monsters and a clever boy who tricked a talking fish into revealing the secret of the tides. The children lean close. You recognize some of the plot points. She's weaving in the recent whale, the way it landed, how the village worked together, how its bones built arches and chairs. In her version, though, the whale was sent by a goddess, its bones enchanted, its oil able to heal the sick. The rib one boy poked another with? A magic staff, lost from the treasure hoard of Ager himself. You smile. The facts are already fading, but the bones remain, and with them the stories. Slippery, shifting, growing. After the tale, a boy whispers to you, "Did that really happen?" You shrug, depends who you ask. He nods gravely, then sprints off to recreate the tale with 2 vertebrae in a bucket. That night, as you walk past the skull on a stick and the spiral of vertebrae outside the Cirrus's hut, you notice something new, a line of small bones leading from the longhouse to the whale shrine. Each one is spaced evenly, polished smooth, etched with simple symbols. A child's path. You follow it, smiling in wonder. How many bones from this single beast will become part of a child's memory? A game, a story, a moment they can't quite explain when they're older, but that lives in their hands, their words, the way they draw spirals in the dirt when they think no one's watching. The whale gave you food, then fire, then furniture. But now, it's giving the village a mythology, one rib at a time. The 10th morning breaks with a different kind of excitement. Not noise, but silence. That eerie hush that settles over a village when everyone is already awake and all talking has dropped to a whisper. You step out of your sleeping furs and immediately notice it. the stillness. No clanking pots, no barking mouse, not even the usual thwack of axe on wood. Just the wind sighing through whale ribs. Then you see the sails, dark, low on the horizon, cutting toward the village like shark fins through silver waves. A longship. Not one of yours. People begin to gather at the shore. The Jarl's already there, standing still, eyes fixed on the incoming vessel. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword, but he doesn't draw it. Not yet. You join the group, heart thudding. The ship's close enough now that you can see the men aboard. Half a dozen, maybe more. Standing tall behind a curved prow carved like a serpent. Traders, raiders, kin. One thing is certain. They've seen the skull on the stick, and they're steering straight toward it. The Jarl raises a hand. The men stop. The ship slows. A moment of tension, and then laughter. Not mocking, but surprised. Friendly, even. The leader, a man in a blue cloak stitched with shells, hops over the side and lands in the surf, arms spread. "We saw your marker," he says, grinning. "Thought we'd meet the people who killed a sea giant." The Jarl grins back, warily. And just like that, the mood shifts. The newcomers are invited in. Traders, it turns out, returning from a voyage west. They carry barrels of smoked herring, bolts of strange fabric dyed red with lichen, and a small pouch of salt crystals that glitter like frost. In return, they want oil. Bone, story, especially story. You're roped into hosting one of them, a wiry man with tattooed hands and teeth stained from chewing bark. He insists on seeing the whale shrine. You take him there, past the rib arch, the vertebra spiral, the comb maker's workshop. He touches everything with reverence. "You made all this?" he asks. You shake your head. "The village did." He crouches beside a long rib, running his fingers over the spiral carvings. Looks like a ship's hull turned inside out. You'd never thought of it that way, but he's right. The longship, the backbone of Viking expansion, mirrored the creatures they hunted and honored. Both were long, curved, ribbed with strength. Both carry people into unknown waters. And now whalebones echo that form, turned into fences, benches, playthings, and monuments. There's symmetry there, a strange poetry. That night, the traders stay. A feast is held. Not lavish, there's still work to be done, but warm, generous, filled with smoke and steam and roasted root vegetables soaked in whale oil. You sit beside the tattooed man and share stories. He tells of a place where whales are considered spirits, never hunted, only watched. You tell him about the day the whale came, the way it looked at you, the way it felt to hold its ribs like spears. He nods slowly. "Some people say whales carry dreams," he says. "Others say they are dreams." Later, over cups of bitter brew, someone mentions the longship's design. A younger boy asks, "Could you build one with bone?" Everyone laughs, but then a hush, a pause. "Could you?" You start sketching in the dirt. Vertebrae as seats, ribs as struts, the jawbone as a prow. It's madness. It's brilliant. It's both. The traders lean in. So does the Jarl. One of the older builders shakes his head. "Wouldn't float." Another grunts. "Wouldn't need to, just needs to look like it floats." And just like that, the idea is born. A ceremonial ship. Not for sailing, but for telling, for remembering. You're there when they begin building it. Not in the fjord. In the fjord, but up the hill where the skull pole stands. You help drag ribs and skull fragments to the site. You shape jawbone into a prow. You dig holes for vertebrae to form the keel. The whole village watches. Some call it the dream ship. It grows over days. The prow snarls. The ribs bend like waves. The whole thing curves toward the sea, though it'll never sail. Children bring their bone toys to place inside. The seeress visits and drops a carved amber bead into the center. The Jarl ties a strip of cloth to the bow, red, stitched with runes. By the 7th day of building, the structure is complete. Half ship, half shrine. It rises like a memory of something that never quite happened, but feels truer than truth. That night, everyone gathers. Torches flicker. A skald tells the tale of the whale, the fall, the fire, the ribs, the throne, the comb, the witch, the game, the dream. Each part is echoed by someone stepping forward with a piece, a bone tool, a carved spiral, a fragment of jaw, a child's drawing. Then silence. The sea whispers, the ship waits. You place your vertebra, your carved spiral from the seeress's hut, onto the deck, and suddenly it feels complete. It doesn't float, but it sails anyway. Through memory, through story, through everything that lives between the tide and the fire. It's the quiet that wakes you, not absence of sound, but its transformation. In the days after the dream ship is completed, the village begins to settle again. The urgent chaos that followed the whale's arrival softens into routine. The oil has been jarred and stored. The bones have found their forms: arches, stools, charms, borders. But one evening, you notice something unusual in the longhouse. A skald, one of the traveling poet historians, has returned from a journey north. He's thin, hunched, wrapped in a cloak that looks more patched than woven. But his eyes, bright, sharp. He carries a carved whalebone flute tucked into his belt, something so unusual it earns immediate silence when he sits to warm his hands by the fire. Someone offers him broth. He nods his thanks. Then he unwraps the flute. It's not a beautiful object. Not in the usual way, it's rough, a bit yellowed, long, slightly bent from age, but the holes are cut with precision, rimmed with blackened soot from frequent use. Tiny runes wrap the mouthpiece. Some you recognize: wind, water, tide. Others you don't. He raises it to his lips and plays. The sound is not what you expect. It's soft, yes, but not simple. The tone is haunting, a kind of distant call that seems to rise and fall with the rhythm of the waves. It hums in your chest, you feel it behind your ribs. Some people close their eyes. Others press their fingers into the dirt floor, grounding themselves. When he finishes, the silence is complete. You whisper, "What was that?" He looks up. "A song for storms." Turns out, this is no ordinary flute. He carved it himself years ago from the ulna of a stranded whale near the White Sea. It took a winter to shape, another to tune. He believes, whether truth or tale, that playing it during rough seas can calm the waves, or if not, at least make dying feel less alone. Historians still debate whether Viking flutes were used in seafaring rituals or just personal entertainment. Some believe the tones had mnemonic purposes, melodies tied to oral histories. Others claim they had more spiritual significance. There's little direct evidence, but carvings of instruments do exist in a few burial sites. And then there's this skald, sitting in your longhouse, playing storm songs on a bone older than some gods. The Jarl approaches and invites him to stay, not just for a night, but for the whole moon cycle. In exchange for food and fire, he'll teach the children to carve flutes of their own. The offer is accepted without words, just a nod. The next day, you're among the chosen. You're given a fragment of rib, not as long as the skald's bone, but still strong, gently curved. You file the edges smooth, mark the placement of holes, bore through with a hot spike. Each part is slow, careful, wrong angle, and the note won't come. Too deep, and the bone splits. The first sound your flute makes is less song and more sneeze. Everyone laughs, even the skald. Every storm starts somewhere, he says. Over days, your skill improves. You practice in the evenings by the whale skull, playing to the sea. The notes waver at first, tentative, shaky, but then they settle, low tones that roll like waves, high notes that flicker like seabirds skimming spray. Other villagers join. Some make drums from stretched hide over curved bone rings. Others turn scraps of vertebra into rattles filled with pebble chips. A new rhythm takes hold in the village. Music not just made from the whale, but for it. Soon, evenings by the fire are filled with these new sounds, songs made of bone, echoes of the sea beast that brought them together. Some play just for joy. Others whisper that the music keeps the bones calm, that it's respectful, that it matters. One night, the skald tells a new tale, one not found in any saga. He speaks of a young girl who lived on the edge of the world, where ice met sea. She found a beached whale, its breath fading, its eye weeping salt. She did not harvest, she did not burn. She sat beside it for 9 days and 9 nights, playing a bone flute carved from driftwood. When the 10th day came, the whale opened its mouth and sang back. It sang a name she had never heard before, her own as it was known beneath the waves. No one breathes when the story ends. You lie awake that night, flute tucked beneath your arm, wondering what your name would sound like underwater. Days pass. Then on a windless evening, a young woman enters the longhouse holding a whalebone bowl, one you recognize. You helped carve it weeks ago. She holds it to the light, turns it and says, "It sings." You blink. What? She runs her finger along its rim, and somehow, impossibly, it hums. Not loud, not complex, but clear. A single note, long and low, like breath drawn through old stone. Word spreads quickly, others try. Some succeed, some bowls hum, some don't. Soon, a small collection of singing bowls forms beside the dream ship. The vulva visits them daily. She listens, never speaks, just listens. One evening, she stands beside the dream ship and declares, "This winter, we'll send a song to the sea." The plan forms quickly, a ceremony at the full moon, a ritual not of sacrifice but of memory. Every tool, every bowl, every comb, every flute, all brought together to play, to hum, to speak. The villagers prepare. Music is practiced. Bones are polished. Children rehearse stories. Even the skull pole is draped in kelp and lit with fish oil lanterns. You're placed at the center of the gathering. Your job? To play the first note. When the night comes, the sky is so clear it feels scraped. Stars blink like tiny fires above. The sea is glass. The only sound is your own breath, trembling in your throat. Then you play. One note, low, long, unbroken. Then another joins. A bowl hums, then a drum, then a voice, then many. No words, just sound. Music made from the beast that once lay dead on the shore, now risen again. Not in flesh, but in spirit, in rhythm, in community, in something deeper than even the whale's bones could explain. The village doesn't just remember the whale tonight. It becomes the whale, breathing, singing, whole. The morning after the music ceremony, the village breathes as one. There is a stillness, but it's not emptiness. It's fullness, like the hush that follows snowfall, or the silence in a longhouse just before the bread is broken. For a brief moment, every part of the village, from the child gripping a carved flute to the seeress still humming to herself beside the singing bowls, feels bound by a shared pulse, echoing faintly through rib and wood, memory and skin. And yet, the work continues. Today your task shifts once more. Not toward tools, not toward shrines, but toward food. You're sent to the cookhouse near the edge of the village, where meals for the hunters, the carvers, the elders are prepared in deep iron pots. It smells of onions and smoke and the distinct richness of something meaty simmering down to its last secrets. Inside, whale bones are stacked in a neat pile beside the fire. Not ribs or jaws, these are fragments, oddly shaped, flattened, trimmed smooth. A woman with strong arms and braided hair hands you one. "Bowls, Shiwibes, you're making yours today." The fragment you receive is worn and weathered but firm. You can see where it once formed part of a vertebra. It has a natural curve, almost cradling your palm, and you can imagine it cupping stew or porridge just as easily as it once cradled a nerve. You work with a dull blade first, scraping the inner curve clean, then a smoother stone to polish. The outer edge is rimmed for comfort. It takes hours, it's not glamorous work, but there's something quietly satisfying in shaping a thing that will someday carry warmth to your lips. A vessel carved from memory that now holds sustenance. When it's done, the cook examines your bowl and fills it. Whale meat stew thickened with barley and wild greens. Salty, dark, comforting. You eat it on a bench outside, watching the sun slice through low clouds, the steam rising in soft curls from the bone's smooth edge. You realize then, the bones don't just carry food, they carry story. Each bowl is different. Some are carved with spirals. Others have the names of their owners scratched on the underside. One bears a tiny fish etched into the handle, another a rune that means safe crossing. These bowls don't sit on shelves, they move. From fire to hand to mouth, from grandmother to grandson, from traveler to home. They are as much part of the family as the stones around the hearth. Later you see a girl stirring a pot with a ladle made from whale rib. She says it creaks if the stew burns. You smile, it's nonsense, but it's good nonsense, the kind that lingers. That evening, the Jarl invites you to a small gathering inside the Great Hall. The fire blazes high and the benches are filled with laughter. Everyone holds their own whalebone bowl. It's like a quiet badge, earned, not given. As the meal ends, a skull begins to speak. He tells the tale of a whale who swallowed a thief. The thief lived inside the whale for 7 days, lighting fires with his breath and carving his name on the whale's ribs. When the whale finally spat him out, the thief was wiser, older, and forever hungry. From then on, he only ate from bone. Never from wood, never from metal. Bone reminded him. People laugh. The story is old but new again. You finish your stew and look down into your bowl. It glows faintly in the firelight, the edge now marked with a fingerprint of grease and soot. You don't clean it. Not yet. The next day, you join a group preparing for a feast. Not for the village, but for the dead. In Viking life, food offerings were often left for spirits, buried near burial mounds, set adrift on boats, or burned at sacred groves. And now you're helping prepare one using whale meat served in the very bones that carried the beast to land. The offerings are simple. Chunks of smoked whale meat, bits of seaweed, flat cakes baked on hot stones, and a thick paste made from crushed dried fish and berries. You help spoon each into bone bowls and line them in a ring outside the dream ship. The vulva chants softly. The bowls are set in silence. Each person adds something personal, a carved charm, a lock of hair, a strip of cloth. One man sets down his father's old comb. A child leaves behind her favorite flute. When it's done, the wind rises briefly, as if pulling the scents upward. The next morning, the bowls are gone. Taken, scattered, eaten, no one knows. But no one questions it. After that, whalebone bowls begin appearing in other places. In traveling packs, in boats, in shrines, even hanging from belts like water skins. They become part of the village's rhythm. They are lent and gifted, traded and treasured. You carve your name into the base of yours, not the name your mother gave you, but the one you dreamed during the flute ceremony, the one the whale might have whispered in its last breath. One cold morning, you sit with an elder who's repairing nets near the water. She eats her breakfast slowly from a small bowl barely larger than a fist. You comment on its size. She nods. "This was my son's," she says. "He took it to sea, brought it back every time." You don't ask if he still does. Instead, you sit quietly beside her, both of you watching the waves. And in your lap, your whalebone bowl glows faintly in the morning sun. By now, the whale's shadow stretches far beyond the beach where it first fell. Its bones sit in your homes, your hands, your rituals. Its story threads through your songs. Its scent lingers faintly in the longhouse wood. But this morning, the whale resurfaces in a way you did not expect, inside the law. The Jarl summons you and a handful of others to a makeshift gathering beside the dream ship. There's no feast, no music, just the rhythmic creak of the wind and the quiet grumble of old men settling onto stools made from vertebrae. At the center of the gathering is a strange sight, a polished rib bone laid across two flat stones like a table. On it, a knife, a feather, a strip of wool, and a smear of what looks very much like dried blood. You glance at the Jarl, his brow is tight, his jaw set. "There's been a quarrel," he says. "Apparently, two neighboring families have come to dispute over grazing rights. Again. But this time it's serious. Someone's sheep was found dead, throat slit, near the border fence. The carcass was burned. No one admits guilt. No one steps forward. Tension ripples under every breath. And so justice is sought, but not in the usual way. Instead of metal scales or blood-priced coins, the Jarl calls for bone. Each family presents a piece. Bone they harvested, shaped, marked. One brings a carved shoulder blade, smooth and elegant, with their family spiral etched deep into its face. The other lays down a hunk of rib with a sharp edge, clearly used as a tool, rough but proud. The Skald steps forward. He holds a whale vertebra like a tablet and begins to recite, "Let the bones speak, let the earth remember. Let what lived return, not in flesh, but in truth." It's a phrase you've heard before, usually whispered during funerals or sung during rites. But here it begins something new, a legal reckoning shaped in bone. The Jarl asks each family to speak their claim, not just with words but with objects. One produces a scrap of wool dyed with elderberry, woven on a loom with a whalebone shuttle. "This cloth proves my flock's color," she says. "My sheep, my land." The other pulls a carved comb, handed down from a grandmother known for her fierce temper. "She bound the fence with this," the man says. "She combed it into place, her mark's still on it." The objects are laid beside the rib table. The Jarl examines each, slowly, turning them in his hands. No one dares interrupt. Then from the side, the vulva steps forward. She carries a small bowl, the kind you know too well by now, and inside it rests a single tooth, a whale tooth, still streaked with sea stain, etched with runes you can't read. She places it between the two families. Let this be the weight, she says. Let this be the line. No one argues. She asks each to pick up the tooth, hold it, feel it. They do. Then the Jarl speaks again, his voice low, calm, unbreakable. You'll split the land, you'll share the grazing, you'll rebuild the fence together, with whale rib and whale sinew, marked with both your spirals. The sea gave us enough to last. You won't dishonor it with petty claims. The verdict isn't perfect. No one smiles. But no one protests either. Justice, Viking style, has spoken. Later, as you help dismantle the rib table, you notice others watching, whispering, not in fear, but in recognition. This was new, different, the beginning of something. That night, someone carves the ruling into a flattened vertebra. They hang it near the longhouse entrance. The bone becomes law. Over the next days, more bones are added to the wall. One describes the settlement of a dispute over fishing nets. Another marks the forgiveness of a broken betrothal, sealed with a shared bowl. Each inscribed in tidy runes, each mounted carefully, side by side like teeth in a jaw. The law wall, people start calling it. Children are taught to read the stories aloud. Elders sit nearby to explain the context. You overhear one say, when words fade, bones remember. And indeed they do. Historians might scoff at the idea of legal documents etched into bone, but evidence exists. Ivory tablets, carved tokens, bone tally sticks. In a world where parchment was scarce and oral memory ruled, why not use what lasts? One morning, a traveling trader visits the village. He's tall, with hair like straw and eyes like river ice. He eyes the law wall with something like awe. I've seen wooden law poles, he says, bronze tablets, charcoal slates. He pauses. But this is alive. You offer him a seat made from a shoulder blade. Serve him stew in a rib bowl. Play a low note on your flute while the wind moans outside. Before he leaves, he presses a coin into your hand, not for the meal, but for the story. Tell it, he says, to the next traveler. And you do. You begin to see that the whale's bones are not just artifacts or memories. They're a language, a system, a network of meaning and power stretching from hearth to horizon. They govern, they guide, they endure. Later in the dusk, you visit the skull pole. You bring with you a small vertebra, polished smooth, blank, and you carve a new set of marks into it. Not for memory, not for music, but for judgment. Then you bury it at the base of the pole, wrapped in salt-dyed cloth, sealed with a whispered oath. Let the bones bear witness. Let them settle what we cannot. Let the sea know we listened. You don't expect beauty from a burial. You expect solemn silence. Maybe the creak of leather as someone shifts their weight beside the grave. A few words spoken with heavy eyes. Cold earth. The blunt thud of a spade. But not this. Not this tapestry of the movement, ritual, and sound that unfolds like waves from the center of the village, rippling outward into the hills and the sea. The man who died wasn't a warrior, not a skald, not a jarl, just a net mender. Quiet, reliable. The kind of man people forget to notice while he's alive, but miss in 1,000 small ways when he's gone. He fixed boats without being asked. He sang to himself while stitching nets, always off-key, always cheerful. He was one of the first to carve with the whale bones, one of the first to hum its melodies on a homemade flute. And now his body rests on a pallet of woven whale sinew, wrapped in furs, his hands folded over a rib bone smooth to a shine. The burial site is high, up where the wind never sleeps and the fjord glints like spilled silver. The entire village gathers, each person carrying something small, something carved or gifted or found, made from the whale. Not because anyone told them to, but because something about this man's life, and now his death, deserves it. You carry a comb, a small one. You remember the day he returned it to you, newly polished. Sharper now, he'd said, for better dreams. You'd laughed, he hadn't, not quite. At the top of the hill, they've dug a grave framed not in wood or stone, but in jawbones. 2 immense arcs of curved ivory white, clean and dry, rising like wings from the dirt. They rest on either side of the trench, the open mouth of a whale turned skyward. It's not meant to frighten. It's not decoration. It's passage. The vulva stands beside the grave, her cloak heavy with bones and feather charms, her face veiled in blue netting. She holds a staff capped with vertebrae, each inscribed with the runes that shimmer faintly in the low sun. She taps the earth 3 times. His ribs return to the sea, she says, but his story stays with the land. And the people step forward. One by one, they place their offerings on the furs that wrap him. A shoulder blade etched with a sailing knot, a carved bead, a drinking cup made from a broken rib, a wind flute. A child lays down a single polished tooth and whispers, "You made me laugh." You lay your comb near his hand. The Jarl removes a strip of red-dyed cloth from his belt, one that once marked the prow of the dream ship, and ties it around the man's wrist. He helped build her, the Jarl says. Now she carries him. The burial begins. No shovels at first, just hands, scooping cold earth into the grave with reverence. You kneel and add your share, feeling the soil fall like slow rain against the furs. Then come the spades, silent, methodical. No rush, no urgency, only rhythm. The whale's bones frame the motion. It feels like you're tucking him in, not burying him. Once the grave is filled, stones are laid, flat, pale from the surf. Between each, bones are placed. Small ones, narrow and bleached, set into the soil like a secret code. Runes carved into fish bones, messages on bird leg fragments. A spiral here, a wave there. Around the stones, the children form a ring, hand in hand, humming the tune they learned during the flute ceremony. It's not a perfect circle. That makes it better. At the center, a large vertebra is set upright, its hollow middle filled with moss and salt. From it, a carved jaw fragment rises like a mast. Upon it, a single word, his name. The wind lifts. The vulva steps forward once more and lights a dish of whale oil. The flames flicker green-blue in the dusk, casting long shadows of the jawbones across the earth. She speaks. We return not just a man, but a thread in our sail, a breath in our horn, a rib in our dream. She lets the fire burn until it flickers out, and then silence. You stay long after the others leave. The burial mound is quiet now, but not still. It breathes. You can feel it. The wind through the grass, the bones humming faintly with the memory of fingers. The ground warmer than it should be, holding the heat of hands, of work, of care. And then you remember this man's last bowl. He'd carved it just a week ago, a small, shallow thing, nothing grand, just practical. But when he handed it to you, he'd smiled and said, "Not for food, for stories." So you return to the village, find the bowl where it hangs in the longhouse rafters, and bring it back. You kneel by the grave and place the bowl at the base of the jawbone marker. And into it, you whisper the story of the whale, from the beginning. Not the part about its death, but the day it came, how the sky was gray and the gulls wouldn't land, how its eye had looked at you, how it fed your hands and dreams and fears and futures, how it became this place, how it lives still in benches and songs and teas and law and bowls and now in this very moment. The bowl catches your breath and holds it. When you rise, you swear the wind says his name, not loud, but enough. The whale gave you oil, light, shelter, order, story. But here on this hill, with the bones beneath your boots and the sky growing thick with stars, you understand the final gift. One-day closure. The whale teaches you how to let go, with hands that build, with bones that remember, with songs that never quite end. The whale is long gone now, not just its flesh or its shape, but the immediacy of its death. The salt, heavy smell no longer clings to the air. The gulls have moved on to other shores. The bone piles have thinned. The frenzy of boiling, cutting, carving, burying, that storm of human energy that erupted the day it arrived, has passed. And yet somehow it feels more present than ever. You feel it in the calm that has settled over the village, in the way people walk more slowly past the dream ship, in the silence that falls when someone places a carved vertebra on the longhouse altar and doesn't say a word. There's one final thing to do. The dream ship must be sealed, not destroyed, not burned, but finished. Completed in a way that means it can never be added to again. What began as a half-mad experiment in tribute has become something else, a shrine, a gathering place, a reflection of the village itself. But if it's to remain sacred, it must be given boundaries. An end. The Jarl announces the ceremony a week in advance. A full moon night. Everyone is to bring one final offering, something from the whale that hasn't yet been placed. Something still held close. Not because it was forgotten, but because it was too precious. Until now. You spend the days leading up to it in quiet preparation. You clean your flute. You carve a new spiral on your bowl. You polish the bone charm you wear around your neck, the one given by the vulva after your dreams first changed. The night arrives cold and clear. The village gathers, cloaked in fur and firelight, around the dream ship's ribs. The stars above are so bright they almost outshine the torches. The wind moves gently through the bone arches, making a sound like a breath caught in memory. One by one, people approach the ship. A woman lays down a tiny carved bead, a gift from her daughter. A boy places a sling made from a whale rib and braided sinew. "My first hunt," he says, shy. The cook offers a ladle. "They never burn stew," she whispers. Even the Jarl lays something down, a jaw fragment with a bit of his father's blood still soaked into it from years ago. "It helped me win a duel," he says. "It won't help anyone else." You hold your own offering tight, a carved comb, the very first one you made, the teeth slightly uneven, the edge chipped. You've carried it every day. It's been with you in rain and smoke, joy and grief. Letting go feels like cutting a part of yourself off. But when your turn comes, you kneel, set it gently at the ship's base, and run your fingers over its spiral one last time. "I'm not giving it away," you murmur. "I'm giving it back." Then the vulva steps forward. She carries a long stirrup of whale skin, tanned and dyed dark blue with crushed berries and ash. Upon it are sewn dozens of bone shards, tiny pieces from throughout the village, each engraved with a rune, a symbol, a name. She wraps this strip around the prow of the dream ship, binding it shut like a mouth that has said all it needs to say. She raises her arms and speaks, not loudly but clearly, her voice slicing the wind. The whale has been heard. Its bones have spoken. Its body is now our body. Its story is now our spine. Then she lowers her arms, no chants, no applause, just breath and stillness. The ceremony ends with a circle, hands linked, eyes closed. No one speaks. You all just stand there, breathing the same air, under the same sky, beside the same bones. You feel the heartbeat of the village align, a rhythm made not of drums or chants, but presence. Eventually, the fire burns low. People drift home. You linger. You walk slowly around the dream ship, running your hand along its curve. The bones are warm from the torches, smooth under your palm, almost humming. You wonder if they remember everything. The cutting, the carving, the combs and bowls, the laughter, the sorrow, the games, the grave. You wonder if they remember you. And then something changes. Not a noise, not a sight, just a feeling. Like the wind briefly changes direction. Like the bones shift, almost imperceptibly, settling into themselves. Like the story has closed. You sleep that night beneath the open sky, head resting on a shoulder blade, dreams soft and dreamless. The kind of sleep that only comes when something enormous inside you has found its rest. In the weeks that follow, the dream ship remains untouched. Not because anyone says so, but because no one dares. Children still play near it, but never on it. Stories are still told there, but only in whispers. It becomes the village's spine, a silent presence, a monument to a moment of perfect communal breath. And when new bones appear, when another whale beaches, 2 winters later, the villagers gather as they did before. They boil, they carve, they cook, they sing. But they do not build another ship. That story has already been told.